Could the most critical and deadliest resource of the 21st century not be oil, gold, or technological minerals, but just an ordinary glass of water? Could a massive and proud dam project built in the mountains of one country become a death warrant and a national security crisis for another country across the border? Are we moving toward those dystopian scenarios we see in movies, the dark age where future global conflicts will truly break out over water? Until today, we have always seen water as a right that flows forever when we turn on the faucet, something free and inexhaustible. But behind the scenes, on maps and at diplomatic tables, a massive strategic war has begun. Today, we are taking a close look at the new geopolitical chess game where the era of oil is slowly closing and humanity will be tested by thirst, the water wars. Are you ready to learn the facts? Why are we discussing this issue so fiercely today, and not for centuries? The answer is hidden not in maps, but in statistics. The world population is increasing at an incredible rate, massive megacities are being established, and the demand of industrial production is growing exponentially every day. At this point, a question may immediately come to mind. Isn't 3/4 of the world covered with water? Why would we experience a water crisis? Yes, there is an incredible amount of water on our world. However, 97% of the water on our planet is saltwater in the oceans. The rate of fresh water that people can drink and use in agriculture is only 3%. And a large part of that 3% is frozen in the poles and glaciers. In other words, 8 billion people have to share a very small pool of only 1% of the fresh water on the entire planet. And while the amount of water in this pool is strictly constant, the number of people who want to drink water from that pool is increasing every second. The main factor that turns this mathematical squeeze into total chaos is climate change. Global warming does not just mean the weather getting a few degrees warmer. Global warming is the complete disruption of the planet's thousands of years old water cycle. The rains that used to fall regularly and fill the dams are now giving way to cruel periods of drought that last for months. Then, a month's worth of rain falls in just 2 hours, and that water flows into the ocean as a destructive flood before it can seep into the soil, going to waste. Glaciers at the peaks of mountains are melting irreversibly. The flow rates and volumes of rivers are changing completely. So the problem we are facing is not just the decrease in the amount of water. What is truly frightening is that water has become unpredictable. Farmers no longer know when it will rain or how to plan their crops. When a water crisis is mentioned, we all think of shortening our shower times or turning off the faucet while brushing our teeth. However, these individual efforts are just a drop in the ocean. The most ruthless and largest consumer of fresh water in the world is not our homes or factories, but the agricultural sector. Approximately 70% of the fresh water used by humanity is used to irrigate fields. And the worst part is that a large part of these irrigation systems is done with incredibly inefficient methods called wild irrigation. Tons of water are poured onto the soil unconsciously and evaporate in the sun before they can be used by the crops. We have to feed people, so we have to irrigate the fields. But while irrigating those fields, we are completely depleting the groundwater. Keep this in mind. The water crisis you hear about in the news today is actually the silent footsteps of the food crisis you will see on your breakfast table tomorrow morning. If there is no water, there is no food. So, throughout history, have the armies of two countries prepared and fought just to capture a river? We need to be balanced on this issue. Throughout history, there have been many local tensions, uprisings, and diplomatic crises over water resources. However, a large, global war declared directly and only for water is very rare. But this does not mean it will not happen in the future. Even if water does not start a war on its own, it is that deadly spark that can suddenly explode existing political, ethnic, and economic tensions. If there are already border conflicts or religious tensions in a region, the decrease of water in that region makes peace completely impossible. The places where these crises are most concentrated are massive transboundary rivers. Because rivers do not recognize the political borders, visas, or passports on maps. They are born in one country, pass through 3 countries, and flow into the sea in a 4th country. The lifebloods of the world, such as the Nile, Euphrates, Tigris, Indus, and Mekong rivers are in exactly this situation. This is where the real massive question begins. Can a political decision in an upstream country, the country where the river is born, be the fate of the country waiting for that water downstream? When the upstream country cuts the water, how will the downstream country feed its farmers? This geographical injustice is one of the largest and most difficult diplomatic problems of today's world to solve. This river tension reaches its peak with concrete signatures placed on maps, that is, massive dam projects. In the past, dams were seen as innocent engineering projects built only to store water and generate electricity. However, today, dams are national weapons, strategic powers, and tools of diplomatic pressure. The most current and dangerous example of this is happening in the heart of Africa. Ethiopia has built a massive structure called the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam at the source of the Nile. For Ethiopia, this dam means providing electricity to millions of its people and escaping poverty. However, for Egypt, thousands of kilometers downstream, this dam means a threat of national extinction. Because Egypt's water and agriculture depend entirely on the flow of that river. Dams are no longer just walls made of concrete. They are massive locks that can bring countries to their knees in international relations. Politicians and the media usually talk about rivers and dams. However, a much more dangerous, much more silent and invisible race is happening underground: groundwater. Massive water basins located hundreds of meters below, namely aquifers, are the lifeblood of millions of farmers and cities in the world. However, this groundwater is like a bank account. We are constantly withdrawing water from there, but that account is filled very slowly by rains over thousands of years. We lower massive pipes underground to irrigate fields and provide water to growing cities. As a result, the level of groundwater drops by meters every year. You may not see any river or dam fights on the surface, but there is a terrible and silent war underground over whose pump will go deeper. And when that water is gone, there will be no turning back. It doesn't take long for the crisis to move from villages to metropolises. Megacities all over the world are under incredible water pressure. In cities where tens of millions of people live, water infrastructures cannot meet this increasing demand. We have seen in history what can happen when the water resources of cities are exhausted. A few years ago, a disaster scenario called Day Zero occurred in Cape Town, one of the most modern cities in South Africa. Dams came to the point of completely drying up, and the government announced that on a certain day, it would completely cut the tap water of the entire city, and people would get water in canisters from squares under military supervision. Although the rains that fell at the last moment saved the city, this event frighteningly showed the whole world how a modern city can be brought to its knees in the face of thirst. Day Zero is waiting at the door for many megacities of the world. If you still think that the water crisis is just about not being able to find water to drink, you are in a big mistake. Water is not just a transparent liquid sitting in your glass. It is the invisible glue that connects the entire global economy. Thousands of liters of water are needed to produce the cotton of the t-shirt you wear. Massive amounts of pure water are used in factories to process the steel of your car and to produce those smart microchips in the phone in your pocket. Water is needed to cool the reactors of nuclear power plants and thermal power plants, and to generate energy. If water runs out, not only your faucets dry up, factories stop, power plants shut down, supply chains collapse, hospitals cannot function, and public health disasters begin. The absence of water is the heart attack of the entire economic system. In light of this dark picture, let's ask the real question again. In the future, will countries send their armies to war for water? We must make a cautious and cool-headed analysis. Water itself may not be a cause of world war on its own. States generally prefer to solve water problems through diplomacy and at the table. However, the decrease in water triggers other major disasters. Parched fields dry up, farmers go bankrupt. Millions of people who are hungry and cannot make a living in their own country start massive and unstoppable climate migrations toward countries that have water and food. Economies collapse, social uprisings occur. In short, water may not be the first weapon to explode in a future war, But it will be the main fuel of the political crises, migration waves, and social tensions that will fire that weapon. Even if water is not the spark itself, it is what will soak all the gunpowder from top to bottom. So, does humanity have to accept this dark fate? Is there no light of hope before us? Of course there is. And that light comes from the laboratories of technology. Countries like Israel, where water resources are extremely limited, are creating an agricultural revolution in the desert today thanks to technology. They turn ocean water into fresh water by desalinating it in massive factories. Instead of pouring water wildly on the fields, they use artificial intelligence-supported smart drip systems that give the roots of the plant only the drop of water they need. They treat wastewater in cities and reintegrate it into the system. They manage loss and leakage rates with satellite data. In other words, if humanity wants to, it has the intelligence to overcome this crisis with science and engineering. When we put all the pieces together, the biggest truth we need to understand is this. The issue is not just the decrease of water on the planet or the lack of rain. The real issue is who controls this water. It is who has access to that clean water and who will manage the gates of the dams. Power is in the hands of the one who holds the water. Future wars may not break out entirely and only under the name of water on maps. But thirst will be the invisible real cause of many major conflicts, civil wars, and migration crises that will occur in the future. As we come to the end of the oil era, humanity is perhaps learning the vital, strategic, and ruthless meaning of water for the first time. So, what do you think about this? Do you believe that the city or country you live in is ready for a water crisis? Or do you think the danger is still far away? Be sure to share your ideas and observations in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue discovering the geopolitical secrets of the future and the approaching crises.